Greetings and welcome to Phantom's Edge. This will be Chapter 16 of this reading. Not one. Not a single one could touch the devil. He was too fast, too agile, too strong with his swings to block. Only a void if lucky. Every bureau soldier in the fight at least swung once before being cut down by the Rodania pirate, each getting the sword shattered by his own. Not long after that, the boy would slice open at least one large, fatal wound somewhere on his enemies' bodies. As only 5 soldiers were left standing, one being the Avifon, Braden, they became hesitant and skittish to try and near the Rodania boy. Thomas stood up as he faced the lieutenant commander and the lieutenant-ranked Ringtail Persioni with the other 3 seamen soldiers behind him, still not willing to near. The boy was covered with the blood of the bureaucracy, his clothes soaked and still dripping. Half of his face was covered in their crimson fluid, his eyes wide open to flare his vicious and demonic gaze. He gave no expression for a moment as he faced the soldiers before him, then grinned from ear to ear. With that, the soldiers knew they had to retreat. Unfortunately, they didn't get far. Thomas jolted back and swung his right hand blade out from his side, slitting 2 of the 3 soldiers' throats with one motion. He then threw up his left-hand sword, while turning to throw his right-hand sword at the lieutenant near Braden, both turning to run away. The weapon the boy threw pierced the Persioni's upper torso, while the second sliced down on the 3rd seaman that nearly got away. Last was Lieutenant Commander Braden, who was luckiest of all to be shot in the back of his head from nearly a quarter of a mile by the boy's pistol in his right hand, not so much as trying to aim the barrel. Those around the docks witnessed the horrifying sight this simple child had done, shocked and scared for both his life and their own. They watched as the double-bladed devil, surprisingly calm as he now was, walked over to retrieve his blades, placing them back into their holsters at his left side. As he put the second one away, he looked out at the sea to find the Ecuador waiting for him. Thomas stood watching the ship, then looked over to notice Brunhilde and Gregory, the Kanai having tossed away his bureaucracy suit for a simple pirate style. He saw the couple raiding a small ship to head back to the Ecuador, which the boy motioned for it as well, with Perry running over to accompany them. When the 2 sat down and the boat started out of the docks, Perry put the sword he took into its holster at his left side, then removed his bureaucracy jacket from him and threw it into the ocean. Afterwards, he looked over at the Rodania and said, "That was amazing, devil. How'd you do that?" Thomas smiled as he continued to gaze at the pirate ship, noticing Kaio at the wheel, and replied, "My father taught me." Brunhilde glanced over at the child as she too smiled, then turned forwards to her ship and said, "Best at least to clean yourself before we step aboard, lad. Your mother will throw a fit about that blood on you." Gregory grabbed a small bucket in the sailboat and filled it halfway with salt water, then poured it over Thomas to wash away most of the blood on his fur. The boy looked over at the Kanai after being struck with the cold liquid, irritated as his ears bent down and he gave an annoyed expression. As Gregory dropped the bucket back into the boat, he looked at the boy and said, "There! Now just say you witness an extreme bar brawl and she'll be none the wiser." Brunhilde glanced back as she laughed and said, "Thanks, Greg." When Thomas was pulled up onto the main ship, he turned to Kaio and said, "Captain, you won't believe what I just found." Kaio drew in a deep breath and went to lean on the port side rail of his ship, facing the boy, putting his left ankle across his right as he placed the tip of his left foot on the deck and quickly said, "Daisy's a spy for the bureaucracy who exposed you right in the center of all the high-ranked military soldiers, where you were chased back down to the docks and me, myself, and I got drunk stupid and threw a sword at you." Thomas just stared at his captain, irritated beyond belief, while the Kanai continued, "That sound about right?" The man glanced over to see the black cat put her hands on her waist sides. Then Kaio looked back at the boy and said, I knew about Daisy / whoever the wench is. And nay, I wasn't drunk." Thank God. Everyone was settling themselves on the Ecuador, cheering their victory for Thomas and Brunhilde, while Kaio steered the ship away from the island towards Amarang. However, just as he turned his ship in the direction of the totalitarian continent, a bureaucracy battleship was seen far off the starboard bow. The Patronage 5, captained by Marilyn, fired no warning as it turned its portside cannons and sent a barrage of cannonballs at the Ecuador as fast as its crew could assemble them. Half of the shots given didn't strike the pirate ship, while others were unable to smash the hull powerfully enough to break through, hardly even cracked it. One flew by Kaio's head as he, calm and nearly uncaring to the situation, fast-walked into the center of the deck as Thomas took hold of the wheel. The Kenai pirate moved over to the Black Cat, looking over at the man beside her, and said, "Get everyone under and keep away from the walls." Gregory looked at the captain, confused, and asked, "What about firing back?" Kaio turned to the captain's quarters as he said, "I've got that handled." Knowing how the pirate couldn't shoot a plate of glass at point-blank range with a cannon, the Felina sarcastically said, "That's reassuring." Brunhilde called for everyone on deck to hide within the ship's hull, protecting themselves from the enemy barrage, while Kaio entered his quarters to get a rifle hanging just above the door's frame. The weapon, labeled Kente, was a special model of a rifle. Made by Lepore craftsmanship, Kente was a rapid-fire, rapid reloading, bolt-action, and scoped rifle, powerful enough to break through any body armor the bureaucracy had to offer. That really only being the thick yellow jackets they wore. Kaio loaded a maximum of 6 bullets into the rifle, cocked it, and swung it to have the barrel across his shoulders as he held it in his right hand. He walked out, unmoved as another cannonball flew by his head. Then the pirate motioned to climb his mainsail. However, he stopped just as Martha tried to walk out from under the deck of the ship, crying as she was being held back by several other pirates. "Where's my son?" Martha shouted. Kaio looked at his crew members, with yet another cannonball rushing over his head, and yelled, "Get her below deck, men! It's not safe up here!" "Give me back my son, you bastard! You can't expose him this way!" With the woman back under, Kaio looked over at the Rodania child and yelled, "Get ready to turn away on my mark, boy! Also!" The bang of a cannon being fired was heard, then the Kenai ended with, "Duck!" The Rodania dropped to kneel down as a cannonball flew overhead, then he stood up and yelled, "Aye aye, Captain!" Kaio climbed his sail, moving to ready himself with the rifle for a shot as the Ecuador neared the Patronage 5. Cannonballs were starting to strike the pirate ship more, while also harder at closer range. Amazingly, they were still unable to damage it badly to sink it. One sail was broken from its mast and back, hitting the deck of the ship as it fell. The captain pirate looked through his scope, lining his sights on a member of the Patronage 5, then he raised his right hand to ready his signal to Thomas. Kaio waited for a minute, then he pointed up as he spun his right hand a few times. The boy swung the wheel as hard as he could, while also diving down to keep from being hit by another shot. Kaio followed his target in his sight. Then the second his ship was aimed to retreat from the bureaucracy, he gave out the shot. Back at the bureaucracy headquarters, Jacqueline was asking to resign from the military by Vice Admiral Edison's request. She stood silent in his office, with James and Rita at attention behind their captain, while the man read the woman's explanation to be removed. He knew it was fake, but still liable. However, he wasn't going to let her go that easily. The Vice Admiral tossed the note onto his desk, sitting back in his chair as he looked up at the captain, and said, "Reasonable excuse, Captain Jacqueline, finding fault that you should have captured the pirate Salvador instead of killing him straight offhand. You also mentioned burning the ships without searching their cargo hold. Another unwise decision. Unfortunately, I can't remove you for that. You're too great of a soldier to waste. However, I will think about your dismissal after you do one last task for the bureaucracy." "Anything, sir," Jacqueline responded. Edison rose from his chair and turned to look down at the docks through his window. Then he said, "If you can bring justice to the Ecuador, its crew, and its captains, either both alive or dead, then I shall retire you from the forces." "Yes, Admiral." With that, Jacqueline saluted her soon-to-be ex-superior, along with her subordinates doing the same towards the Vice Admiral. Then the three headed off to embark to find Captain Caio. Just as the doors were shut, Edison took in a deep breath as he looked down at where the Patronage 5 was readying itself to set sail. Marilyn was moving to step aboard her ship with her lieutenant commander, Catherine, where they planned to intercept the Ecuador. However, the two Perseones were halted by both Admiral Chief Cornelius and his daughter. Josefina walked at her father's right side, now wearing a bureau outfit with the ranking symbol of a commander, as she gave only an angry expression towards the captain. Both Perseones stopped as the Hume approached and turned to face the captain and lieutenant commander as the Admiral Chief said, "Captain Marilyn, I must ask of you to take my daughter Josefina with you." Marilyn glanced at the Hume girl, then looked back at the Admiral Chief and said, "You sure, sir? Because I would think she'd be better off either home or with you." "Shut it, coon," Josefina barked. "I heard about what you and Gregory did. Maybe if you weren't such a damn slut, he wouldn't have left for some thrill-seeking with another woman." Josefina moved to grab the captain's shirt tightly with her left hand, pulling the Perseone closer as the Hume continued. "Best thing for you to do right now is to shut it. I may be ranked as a commander, but I'm commanding this ship now until I get my fiancée. Gregory's mine, and there's no one who can take him away from me, and I will see to that." Josefina then pushed the captain aside, stomping by as the Hume went to board the Patronage 5 and yelled, "Now get out of my way!" Marilyn glanced at the commander, then looked back as the Admiral Chief walked away. As they saw the Hume head off, Catherine said, "Sorry about that, Captain." Turning away to step onto her ship, the captain said, "At this point, I don't even care." The Patronage 5 sailed for a few minutes in the quiet ocean, then caught a glimpse of the Ecuador far out at sea. Her ship alone, Marilyn and her crew ready to send out a warning shot. However, Josefina stepped in with her authority and ordered all cannons to aim and fire upon the pirate ship when in range. She wanted the enemy to pay for their crimes, not realizing that Gregory might be aboard the pirate ship as well. As the ships neared for a starboard side standoff, Josefina stood alongside with Marilyn and Catherine at the center of their ship's deck. They watched as the Patronage 5 readied to fire their cannons at the pirate ship's sails, feeling confident they were to win the battle. However, something strange about the enemy vessel caught attention to Catherine's eyes. The Perseone noticed there were no other members on the ship above deck, other than the boy who was guiding it at the wheel, and the male captain, for some reason in the crow's nest. Yet when the woman noticed the dual-edged demon, she saw that he had signaled for the double-bladed devil to do something, then found the man holding a rifle in his grip, aiming it at the lieutenant commander. Catherine widened her eyes as she recognized the rifle and said, "Oh no, that's..." Everyone on the Patronage 5 noticed the Ecuador retreating, but were unable to stop it. They went to try and chase it, while Catherine tried to hide from the rifle's range, yet she and the crew were interrupted by a single shot given out from the pirate ship. It was a small shot, obviously not from a cannon, but it wasn't from a normal pistol either. Catherine stopped and ducked, moving to hold her arms over her head. Then she found she was still alive. Josefina and Marilyn had ducked too, not realizing where the shot came from. Then all three women stood up and looked around to find where the bullet had hit their vessel. Caio looked over his rifle's scope to examine the bureaucracy's ship, finding his target still alive and well. Then he turned away to examine his rifle. He stared at the weapon, confused, checking every possible thing that could have gone wrong with it. However, with his back turned, he had no idea of what was to happen. Unknown and unwillingly, the pirate had actually struck a vital point in the Patronage 5's hull. As the Ecuador was sailing away, the Patronage 5 had an explosion go off under its deck. They had no idea until then that Caio had shot at where the barrels and barrels of gunpowder and TNT were, striking a fuse that set off the barrel it led into seconds later. Each barrel blew up under the deck around Josefina and Marilyn, while a few neared killing Catherine. Everyone on board the Patronage 5 scrambled to stop their ship from breaking apart and sinking, including Josefina and Marilyn, yet no one could help the lieutenant commander. Catherine motioned away from the explosions as best she could, then stopped as she stood next to the mainsail. She glanced out, seeing the Ecuador slipping out of the bureaucracy's reach. Then someone within her crew called for her to look out. However, it was too late. By the time Catherine looked up, a sword that had loosened from both its sheath and the barrel it was placed in aimed its tip down and struck her through her chest, killing her instantly. In his ignorance, Kaio never looked back to watch the Patronage 5 undoubtedly fall by his hands. He was too concerned about why his rifle's shot didn't hit Catherine directly, and why he couldn't hit anything using a gun of any sort. Kaio scratched his head for a moment with his right hand, holding Kente by its barrel with his left. Then he dropped his right hand and asked, "Do I have to readjust this thing again?" He then shrugged his shoulders as he said, "Oh well." The captain pirate climbed down from the crow's nest, while Thomas went to stand and take hold of the wheel once more. Kaio moved to return the rifle back to the captain's quarters. Then he motioned to stand at the Rodania's left side. Just as he stepped to the boy, Kaio said, "Maybe Brunhilde really is an unlucky gal to cross." He then looked at the child and said, "Keep her steady, my boy. We're not clear until we're out of range of their cannons." "Aye, aye, Captain." Finally breaking free of the crew holding her back, Martha ran out to check on her son. She had to see if he was still alive. She had to know firsthand. Kaio and Thomas noticed the woman run out from under the ship's deck. Then the boy glanced back to see the spark of a cannon being fired from the bureaucracy's vessel. With that, Thomas felt his mother was in trouble and left the wheel just as the sound of the blast was heard. He tried to move over to his mother to at least get her to duck away from the shot given. Thomas was only a few feet away, but the sound of the cannonball came forth and struck down on the ship's hull, crashing through the upper deck. Stopping as the final attack from the Patronage 5 was given and hit the Ecuador hard, the Rodania boy could only stand in fright at what he witnessed. His heartbeat seemed gone, his lungs became unable to bring forth air, and even his ears were deaf to the world. Traumatized by his vision, Thomas saw someone before him be taken from his presence. This concludes the reading of Chapter 16. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, be sure to check out my other two novels, Lore of the Endowment and Ryu the Demon Slayer. Link will be in the description below. Other than that, stay safe, take care, and we'll see you again next week, reading Chapter 17.